Hello and welcome to the Scatterworld channel, and today we're going to be benchmarking the new Radeon RX 5600 XT with the Ryzen 5600X on your favorite games, just to see how good it is. Who knows, you could be looking at a pre-built with this GPU and CPU, and you may just be curious to see how it performs at 1080p and 1440p, so don't worry, I got you covered. I want to thank those of you who voted in the YouTube community poll for this CPU and GPU combo. I saw a lot of votes for the Ryzen 3600, aka the everyman's gaming CPU, so I will be benchmarking that CPU as well with this graphics card. So if you want to see that, click that subscribe button and the bell notification button, and I'm here to stay. I'm back, as you can tell. So like I said, this is the 6600 XT, but it's specifically the XFX Merc 308 Black Edition, and I'll go ahead and give you guys a quick spec rundown. So it has a base clock speed of 2,359 megahertz. It has 8 gigabytes of GDDR6 memory, 256 gigabytes per second memory bandwidth, and a 128-bit memory interface. It also has 32 compute units, 32 megabytes of infinity cache, 2,408 stream processors, and a $380 MSRP. Now, if we take into account the insane graphics card demand and material demand, that $380 MSRP is definitely higher than my expectations, but I mean, it's to be expected in this day and age. So really it's just gonna come down to its relative performance to its competitors, like the 5700 XT, the RTX 3060, and so on. But I guess what I'm more concerned about is what the actual street pricing for this graphics card is really gonna be. Will it be 380? Most likely not, probably like at least 500 or 600, but we can only hope it's better, and at least that its availability should be better on day one for gamers, because it has to get into the hands of gamers. But for the CPU, we're going to be pairing it up with the Ryzen 5600X. This luckily is in stock on a site like Amazon, and it's actually currently below MSRP at $280, which is good to see, being like what, 10 months since its release date. So finally we're getting those Ryzen 5000 series processors in stock and available, and now for lower than selling price, which is good. And I like the CPU for these sorts of videos because realistically you can pair it up to an RTX 3070 Ti and have no problems in terms of bottlenecking. So this 6600 XT is going to be no problem for it. If anything, I'm more curious to see how this CPU will perform when compared to the Ryzen 3600. And we'll see if it can handle the entirety of this 6600 XT again in that future video. So with all that said, let's get right into the benchmarks, starting with your favorite, Fortnite. And here on the CPU and GPU combo at 1440p and 1080p at epic settings, we're getting 106 frames per second at 1080p and 65.2 at 1440p. So I think fairly respectable numbers. If you were to decrease the graphical settings, you're looking well into the hundreds for 1440p and well into the 200s probably for 1080p. But if you wanted the best looking option for Fortnite without turning on ray tracing, you'll get some good performance, but not the most to max out like your 144 hertz frame rate for like a 144 hertz monitor. But going on to Rainbow Six Siege, which is already going to be a piece of cake. What is it? 274 frames per second at 1440p and just about 400 frames per second average at 1080p. I mean, yeah, it's the benchmark, but it's a 6-year-old game at this point. Not a problem. At this point, I should exclude it from the benchmarks, but you guys played a bunch, so I'm leaving it in. Okay, Grand Theft Auto 5 using the benchmark tool, 1440p, just about 100 frames per second, and at 1080p, 121. So I think a pretty impressive result for the 1440p frame rate. At 1080p, I don't know, Grand Theft Auto 5 just does not like being run at above 100 frames per second unless you have a top tier graphics card. So I'll call it a win for this card, but let's see what the rest of the benchmarks have in store. Okay, Call of Duty Warzone, 104 frames per second average at 1440p and 150 at 1080p. This I think is a pretty good result for the 6600 XT, considering a lot of the graphical settings in that game were cranked up to their highest setting, and without ray tracing, I think this is pretty acceptable. Then closing out the esports first-person shooter games, we have Apex Legends being run at the highest settings, even with the VRAM amount pushed up all the way to 8 gigs, but TSAA anti-aliasing on. And for frame rate, at 1440p, we got an average of 126.8, and at 1080p, 168.6. So I think if you were to crank down the settings a little bit, you can get that 1440p result to 144 frames per second average, and the 1080p result, I don't know, it's already above 165, so I think you're covered. So Apex Legends, not a problem on the 6600 XT and the 5600X. But now let's get into some more specific case scenarios with like ray tracing and Fidelity X, and kicking off with our favorite ray tracing title, Cyberpunk 2077. It don't look good. It don't look good. What? Even with ray tracing turned off at 1440p, we're getting about 40 frames per second average. So for those super high-end AAA incoming titles for like 2021 and beyond, this card might not cut it at that resolution. At 1080p, it'll probably stand a better chance. But at least as far as ray tracing goes, unless it has something like Fidelity X or FSR backing it up, I wouldn't exactly look into ray tracing for the 6600 XT. But here's a game where ray tracing and Fidelity X actually come into play quite nicely. Here on the Rift Breaker, we're comparing the 1440p results, and when you turn on Fidelity X and ray tracing, you're actually getting more frames per second, similar to what we'll see in like DLSS on NVIDIA cards. So that's a good result that we want to see for those who want to have ray tracing and Fidelity X or FSR and still have increased frame rate, but also have that beautiful ray tracing. But then we'll go ahead and close out with Death Stranding, just doing a straight up Fidelity X on and off result. And here at 1440p, if you enable Fidelity X at the highest settings, you can get up to 26% more frames per second at 1440p, bringing in this game that was already quite playable at 1440p to not even a problem. So if you have that option for your AAA title, definitely enable Fidelity X and FSR. If you're looking for a new FPS and esports gaming mouse that can register your inputs as fast as humanly possible, then consider the Corsair Sabre RGB Pro. With its fast lightning, 8,000 Hz polling rate in combination with a fast gaming CPU, your latency, response times, and reaction times can all go down when using this mouse in your next Warzone, Apex, Fortnite, or Valorant match. It's also 72 grams in weight, so not too light, but also not too heavy. And its simple shape ensures it'll be compatible with almost all mouse grip types out there. So if you want to check it out, I'll have a link to the Corsair Sabre RGB Pro in the description below. So the main marketing focus for the 6600 XT is 1080p esports gaming, which, yeah, it does the job, but I think for a lot of us graphics card buyers out there who may be looking into a card like this, we aren't just going to be playing Apex, Rainbow Six Siege, or those sort of games. We're going to be playing a little bit outside the box, maybe not even the latest or greatest games. It could be an older game, which will not be a problem at all on this graphics card, like Rainbow Six Siege. But if we want to play like the next Assassin's Creed, or whatever CD Projekt Red has in the year like 2024, this card will probably not cut it at 1440p. It probably will at 1080p, especially if it has a feature like Fidelity X or FSR to help boost that frame rate while retaining the resolution. But otherwise, this is a mid-range graphics card that is overpriced at the moment. So that is it for today's video, and I want to thank you guys for watching. And actually, I need to treat graphics cards more carefully, especially in this day and age. Anyways, if you want to become more involved with the Scatterville community, consider following me on Twitter, Twitch, Instagram, and TikTok, and all of that can be found in the description below. And for those of you who have been here for a while and were really waiting for my first video back, thank you for making it to this point in the video. And don't worry, I'm here to stay. A lot has changed. Anyways, that is it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching, and this is the Scatterville channel, signing out.